traumatized babies and mentally ill Barbies. Let's talk Little Heaven while it is still fresh in my mind. I have just finished this book today. It took me a few days to read it, and what my overall feelings about this book are is that it was good enough. The writing is good. It's very heavy-handed in places, but this was in general a well-constructed story for what it is. This is more of an action horror book. There are lots of really big action sequences. It is very violent, and the supernatural elements that are present are immediately in your face. There is no steady ramp up to a supernatural reveal. We are just aware, page one, that there are monsters in this book. They are right there on page one, sort of full focus, full description, and I'm pretty sure even at the beginning they talk. That's not typically my type of horror. When I started Little Heaven, I hated it because it's a Western. When we're meeting our trio of mercenaries, we are being introduced to them in like shootouts. This is taking place in two different time periods. The bulk of the story is being told in the 1960s, and then there is a shorter section being told in the 1980s. So in the 1960s, you know, these people are going into bars and things like that, but you know, the bars are run down and disgusting, and everybody who's in the bar is ugly, and there are whores there, and the whores have no teeth and are just debased and turning tricks in bathrooms, and when you get whiskey, the whiskey is bad, and then like everybody dies. And the violence in the book is rendered in a way where it's very, very close up and very detailed. It's sort of like in Ren and Stimpy or SpongeBob, where the cartoon will look regular and then all of a sudden you're like zoomed in for this close-up of a character looking horrible, which isn't bad, it's just not something that really affects me. And also, this is like a personal, probably little nitpicky thing, but words like gibbering and I don't know if it was shambling, like Nick Cutter used a bunch of H.P. Lovecraft words. It tends to take me out of the description because I'm just like, oh, this is just that H.P. Lovecraft shit. This book is essentially like a Western desert version of John Carpenter's The Thing, but not good. The way that the monsters are described, it's just kind of like, you know, they have an excess of parts. Lots of eyes, lots of teeth, lots of flesh things just kind of merged together and goo. And when I was reading it, I was just like, oh yeah, he saw The Thing. And listen, that imagery is very effective, but again, you can't just throw that imagery into a narrative and expect that to do all of the work for you. So now that I've launched into all of that, let me give just a short little description of this book's plot. It is about three mercenaries who are hired by a woman to check up on her young nephew who has been taken by his father to a remote religious settlement out in the New Mexico woods, and this cult is called Little Heaven. She is worried about her nephew because she doesn't want him being indoctrinated, but if he is happy where he is, then she's just sort of like, I'm fine with leaving him there, but you know, a kid doesn't have any choice, so I want to make sure that he is consenting to this. And if he does not, in fact, want to be in this cult, I would like to extract him. So she has hired these three mercenaries to help her do this. When they go to Little Heaven, they find a whole bunch of strange things happening, the people being affected in weird ways, and this quickly spirals out of control, and they all end up trapped in the cult, and there is, of course, a couple of showdowns, and then something occurs with the three mercenaries where they are able to leave this place, but they are affected by the thing that has drawn the cult to this location, and it is suggested that likely this thing over the eons has drawn many more people to it. That's the 1960s version of the plot. The 1980s segments are about what happened afterwards, and also how the three mercenaries are drawn back to the location for a final showdown with the thing. We're not really ever told exactly what this thing is. Also, it has minions. One of the main minions is very Pan-like. It's not dressed in a suit, but it's like a weird version of Slender Man. It affects children especially, and it plays the flute. It also messes with people. It's very much a trickster being, and it tends to like to draw people into games. I really wish the monsters would have been more interesting. While everything is written competently, these are not characters that we are dealing with, any of them. They are caricatures. So you are dealing with, you know, the hardened and bittered mercenary woman who longs for death. Ebenezer is like the gentleman mercenary. And then we have Micah, who is that kind of Clint Eastwood, stoic, man of few words, yet with the heart of gold mercenary. Then we have the sheepish, spineless cult members, the evil cult leader Reverend, who's nasty, and his two henchmen who are also disgusting. It's just there to get you to latch on to familiarity. Like, if you understand the archetypes that are being used, you basically know what's going to happen throughout the entire story. Like, nothing in the book is going to come as a surprise to you. It's those characters, it's those archetypes, it is that story, and there are no surprises. And that's my issue with it. But here's the thing. So I started out hating this because I really don't like Westerns, except for Unforgiven, which is a complete banger. Something I would warn people about, content trigger warning, if you're sensitive to the following things, this is not the book that you want to be exploring. If you are very, very sensitive to lots of racial slurs being used, if you're sensitive to lots of homophobic slurs being used, misogyny, this book is very, like, when we get into the antagonists' heads, they're not pleasant places to be. There's also a lot of SA talk. There's one instance where something is going down on the page that is violent, but it is not graphically detailed. There is lots of child death and torture. It's not especially impactful because the children, once bad things start happening to them, they have already been dehumanized in a way, and also not shown before they've been impacted by this supernatural dehumanization. It's very empty. Oh, also, if you have any type of religious trauma or religious trauma surrounding kind of essay-ish topics, definitely not for you. A lot of the stuff with the Reverend, when we're inside his point of view, is just like whenever we had a chapter or a passage with him, it's just foul. He gets very sexually creepy in like weird ways. There's portions of this book where you are in his mind as he's remembering things that he did to other children. It's just really, like, it's skin crawling stuff. And what irritates me a bit about it is that is inartful to me. It is not hard to get someone to be repulsed by something like that. But that was something else that I did not like about this book. It is that all of the egregious racism and homophobia and also fat phobia and misogyny, like all of it is relegated to the antagonist characters. If you're a protagonist, even if they're a mercenary, you're going to generally enjoy being with them. You're not really conflicted about liking any of the mercenaries. You're not gonna get any racism from Micah directed at Ebenezer, who is black. You are not going to get misogyny directed at Minerva from Micah or Ebenezer because Minerva is a woman. They are very much like pure in that way, but if you are in the head of an antagonist, you better believe they're going to be racist, homophobic, misogynist, they're going to be serial essayers, they are going to be PED, you know, like they're going to be that. They're going to be sexually sadistic, and it's all contained in them. So it is very neat that way. Someone who is being that way is someone who is all the way bad, and they are going to die a horrible death, and maybe you'll be pleased about that. I just think it's not really making a statement, right? So essentially the statement is, this is bad. Like, these are bad people. And it's like, no shit. It would be way more complex if we had some of that from a character we actually liked. Then it would make me think about something. Then I would actually be having very complex feelings with my allegiances in the narrative. But it is not that story. It is very much good guys, bad guys, monster, chaos. So if you want to read the equivalent of an entertaining little like action-packed horror B-movie, this is probably the book for you if you do not mind any of the content warnings that I mentioned. It is a relatively quick read, and even though I hated the beginning of this, after all the mercenaries came together, which goes on way too long, by the way. Once they've accepted this job and they get on the way to the cult, things picked up. I was actually enjoying myself at that point. And it gets way less stylized as a Western. If you are someone who enjoys some gun porn and weapons porn, also some vehicle porn, you will also enjoy this book. If I was going to give this a star rating, I would give it a 3. So if you want maybe a fun summer horror action beach read, I do recommend Little Heaven for you. I think for the right person, this would be a very fun romp.